Songs are prayers, mantras for becoming, anthemic heirlooms and portals to our deepest truth. Songs are my favorite way to connect with people and their stories. My name is Hope Littwin, and this is Three Songs Podcast, a place to excavate your story through the songs that raised you. Kimbra is a beautiful soul. I saw her play a live set of improvised pop music with Exotech in New York City that was truly transcendent, and asked her after if she would be open to visiting campus and speaking with the students about her incredible creativity, and she agreed. She's an amazing technician, a lifelong student, and devoted mind, body, and soul to music and creativity. I hope you enjoy this conversation of Three Songs with Kimbra. He says, what makes us feel drawn to music is that our whole being is music. Our mind, our body, the nature in which we live, the nature that has made us, all that is beneath and around us. It's all music. I love that.
Wow.
And then
everything is vibration, of course.
Yeah.
So it actually is scientifically, true too, yes.
He says, from the miniature music that we understand, they expand themselves to the whole universe of music, and in that way we were able to inspire. The ones who find the key to the music of the whole working of life. It is he who becomes intuitive. It is he who has inspiration. It is he whom revelations manifest. For then his language becomes music. I love it.
That's so beautiful. Wow.
I see that when you perform live. I see like a very sensitive, intuitive human being who like is able to play. Like there's a certain facility, but it's like I think that there's like an openness too, and I think that's what you were just saying about like, oh, I want to get away from like the structured thing and open it up. And it's like, yeah, if you have the intuitive ability to like kind of have that sensory scanning, and then it's like, why not use it?
Scanning's a good word, because it's like deep listening, and then pulling out things from the ether. What are you not hearing in the space? How can you contribute in a way that like it's not happening? That's how I started like making music too, is like, what do I want to hear that I'm not hearing already in the landscape? So if you do that in improvisation, wait until you hear something that you can contribute that is currently not happening, but you're hearing happening, So, but that takes like a deep kind of listening, and you're right, like empathy almost, you've got to like hear where they're coming from, and it's conversation.
Right. And that idea of like tuning in.
Yes.
Like instruments tune, but then in a group of people you tune.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And trying to move away from having to prove yourself, which is it's a performative thing to like, I'm going to step up and prove my craft. But like in certain spaces, or definitely what I try to inhabit in performance is like, how can I move out of proving and into giving, and therefore a unit of space where I kind of become tuned in to the other musicians and the audience. Yeah. That's where that like sensitive part comes from, of like wanting to give rather than take so much, Do
you have to like replenish that like in a live setting where you're kind of like channeling all of this energy? Do you find that you are drained at the end?
Actually, yeah. And that's a bit of a part of my frustration with touring at the moment too, and like my accessibility to fans, which is like a beautiful thing in one way, that you open and, do meet and greets and things like that.
There's so many of them and only one of you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's actually something I'm having to reassess. And, if that's what the work is such a giving export, then how do I make sure that I, have a resilience in the peripheral things around that performance? Because there's just you're not invincible. Like you start to run on like 5% energy reserves, and you're still giving a great performance, I guess, but you're inside feeling that you've kind of got nothing left, and then it becomes a sort of like martyrdom of like performance. It's just like, that's the sacrifices that we do give ourselves to performance, and it becomes a kind of a sacrificial thing sometimes. But there's a balance where if you drive that to the ground, like we've seen many artists do, you can lose your capacity to make it sustainable. so big questions, right?
Yeah, I feel like everyone's dealing with an issue of scale right now. And I think our generation has to handle it in an even more intense way than maybe previous generations, where it's like there's like worldwide scale of accessibility that's just different. And like, I don't know, it's like the I'm a Kundalini yoga practitioner.
Okay,
and in that like area, they talk about like the 10 bodies, that your physical body is like the last place that change happens, and it's the slowest, and it's like the most connected to kind of like earthy things, but it moves the slowest, it changes the slowest. So it's like changes have to happen on your etheric bodies before they kind of make their way through to physical. So there's this idea that like we're in these really slow bodies, and like working in sound and like electricity and like all these like beautiful elements, they move so fast.
That's right.
But it's like moving something that moves that fast through such like a heavy mechanism.
Whoa.
It like short circuits. And I feel like, yeah, it's like, okay, how do I process that amount of like movement through?
Yes. How do I house it?
Yeah.
My God, that is like so helpful for exactly where I'm at. Like, thinking of the body as this kind of slower organism that you need to somehow get it to sync up with how fast,
or acknowledge its capacities too, and be like, oh, this is the kind of thing that I could only do in these capacities, otherwise this like housing mechanism burns out
totally, and
there's not another one. So,
yeah
that's right. But it is frustrating when it's like, oh, but these other things are running at like full throttle, and like ideas come, and like things move.
Yes, energies exchange, and you want to keep up with that.
I wrote down the sensitive dynamics of the producer artist, because I was listening to an interview you did where you were talking about that. But you are a producer, and it's very interesting to like, I don't know if I'm 36 now. Are you 33?
33, yeah. 33?
And there's something about, I don't know what your experience was growing up in studios, but I remember I started in a studio when I was like 16 or 15.
Wow.
And it was such a different world then. It was like, oh, little girl, here's what you want to say. Like, you are saying this, but here's what you really mean. You know, like that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And it was so challenging to like figure out, first of all, that a girl could like be a producer.
Totally.
Like I couldn't quite I was like, I know that's not what I want to say, but I don't speak your language yet, so I can't explain it, and I don't have a lot of examples to pull from of like Joni Mitchell is my hero, so I was like, I know girls can write songs now. Yes. That's something I know. But I haven't figured out that a girl could be a producer, or like what that dynamic looks like, and that has shifted a lot.
Yeah, it has.
But like, how did you come into even that conception of like, this is my domain?
Well, I think claiming even that word is still kind of awkward for me, because it's still that thing of like, but am I good enough to be a producer? But am I technically inclined? Because, you know, I mean, I'm very technically inclined, but it's like, am I, there's still those conditionings of, because we don't have as many examples in front of us of people doing it professionally, there's still the imposter syndrome of like, actually, can I sit inside that kind of role? Because it wasn't something that was told to us from a young age that we have the same, I guess, just natural capacity for, which is of course ridiculous, because like you said, we have just as much imagination. We just didn't, much of the work for us women is to empower ourselves with the technical vocabulary so that we can, talk on the same levels. But it's funny because we do work differently, and I think we have this intuition as women, and we're sometimes more, touch based. And so actually when you get on a computer, and just to tell my experience, sometimes I would just demonstrate by just doing. So like I just became really fast at the program, and then finally was able to have the confidence to be like, and I'd always do it with a million apologies, of course, but like, sorry, but would you mind sorry, but is that okay if I jump on?
Yeah.
And then finally it's like,
you're tired of getting the like, oh, that's impossible.
Yeah.
I do it every day.
Yeah. And so it's like, can I just do that? And then of course I'd get on, and you know, this is not my words, but the words of a producer I once worked with, who say, "You're faster than everyone here." So you know, that's
the first thing I heard. I'm working with a teacher on this album, like I said, learning how to mix really slowly, and I was like, "Oh, Kimbra's coming." He was like, "She's so fast at Pro Tools." Oh my gosh, she's so fast at Pro Tools.
I think I have developed a little reputation. I'm also very chaotic with Pro Tools and work off grid and cut and shuffle things, all based on a more intuitive
music shouldn't
swing.
be on a grid.
Yeah, I know.
That's the first thing I do is take that slip grid off.
Yeah.
Like, no, I don't
that's cool. I really like that. I also like to just cut to waveforms. I find the kick and I just kind of do it to that rather than, because then I feel a little bit more trying to retain some humanity, I guess. And because a lot of the technical people I'd work with in studios were raised in that kind of very, you know, logical, rational minded, you know, way of working, perhaps there was something a little threatening about someone coming in being just as fast but coming at it from a very different lens. And so that, of course, with time just takes collaboration, and we can see that, oh, what wonderful balance we have here when we can all work together and, you know, encourage one another. But yeah, in terms of how I found confidence with that, I think it was demonstrating through example, by being able to just do it quickly, and then also learn the basics of how to explain myself so that there wasn't such a struggle to communicate, which that's sort
hard.
Of puts us in the back seat sometimes when we're, you know,
it's hard not to be defensive too. I find for myself, I'll speak for myself. Because it's easy to be like, yes you can, you know what I mean?
Right,
like, you can't do that. I'm like, yes you can, I do it every day. You know, and then like no one wants to listen, you're like, it's okay. No one is attacking you.
Right, because we don't want to do the same culture as what we've been given, right? We want to change it and make it more collaborative. But it can be a very discouraging thing in studios. And when I started out, I just kind of assumed the role that I was always, the artist coming in, and there was clearly a producer, engineer, and I, you know, had my space. And very quickly it became evident to me that in order to do my job as a vocalist and as a songwriter, I needed to have some kind of autonomy and like work with the choreography of all the other elements in order to do my best work they were all integrated. The songwriting was in me making adjustments to the feel of the hi-hat and the velocity of things and the level of the bass and being able to jump in and stack my own vocals. Like that was informing. So I couldn't separate them. I couldn't just come in and sing and leave the studio. It was like the vision required me to get in there and apply my instinct to all the little aspects, because we're trying to get out what's in here, right? That's the whole thing, is like I hear these things, I have these rhythms in my body, and I have to like now manifest them. But if I'm letting someone else, and of course I'm not, clearly I collaborate so much and that's great, but if I'm talking over here and they're doing it over there, I'm not getting that direct line of energy that I think is imperative if I'm going to really get the truth out of the sentiment. And a great producer, a great engineer knows when to help and when to be like, you know what, I do have a skill set that's actually going to help move this forward better, because Lord knows I know my limitations in the studio. Some things I certainly, you know, but a great collaborator also knows that like this person is bursting and they need to just space. And there's got to be some direct channel that I've got to allow for them, even if it's a bit rough around the edges or something. That's we're trying to what's the word, when like an elixir, the artist has this elixir of like pure truth, like essential and it's like, what can we do to empower the artist to be as and that takes work. It's not, you know, I'm sure you've put in a lot of work to make sure that you can be like technically on an equal level as
you've said so much. There's like a world in what you've just said that I think like a general theme that I'm seeing, I think in like a yearning on my side, and kind of what I'm hearing what you're saying, and I think where we're generally headed is this more like openness to not knowing in a creative space, which we kind of have gotten away from a little bit, where it's like more, I don't know, like scientific method of like, if this then this, if this then this, and that's kind of true, and that works like on a certain capacity, and that's useful information. But I feel like we're all kind of like doing this right now, where it's like and not to gender it so much, but it does feel like a more feminine way at like, actually you talked about the like Yale Library on the way here. One of my favorite things about the Yale Library is there's like a painting when you walk in of this woman who's holding like a staff and a sphere. And the sphere is they call it the sphere of knowledge. Wow. And I was like, that image makes so much more sense as a symbol to me than like knowledge as a pyramid. Like, here's your foundational understanding, and then once you know that, you build everything else on top of that. But it was like, oh, this idea that like you kind of understand this, and then you get a new piece of information, and then your world kind of opens like this, and then you kind of, but the foundation has to like be malleable or something. Like, all of what you thought was foundation is now crumbled.
Yes.
But your world has opened, and I think the way that we talk about kind of like step-by-step creativity is limited a certain way that I think we're moving out of, and it feels more of like this like intuitive feminine not knowing approach of like, what if we just like hold the space and just like wait for it, and just it almost feels like uncomfortably holding like a container or something, being like, I think it's gonna get filled, but I don't know yet, and I kind of feel like an idiot right now because it's not filled right now.
Oh my gosh, I need to hold that. Yes, feeling like an idiot. Yeah, totally.
Oh yes.
The discomfort of the creative process is so real, and it's funny you talk about a sphere because I think a lot about circles and loops, and I've kind of been quite terrified of loops and circles, not so much in a musical context, but like in life, like the idea of being on, never breaking your patterns as a human, like, but I'm kind of slowly, as I go through more life and more, honestly, pain and difficulty and adversity and all the things that actually make us grow, realizing that the circle is actually
all the things that actually make us grow.
Yeah, all the stuff of life that actually really sucks. It's kind of, it is uncomfortable because we witness ourselves doing this. Why am I having to learn this over and over again? Or in the creative process, why have I still not overcome this major insecurity about this one thing and I can't let go of it? It goes round and round and round and round. But with time, I think, and when we trust the circle, and it's made me think of this with the sphere, it becomes a place of holding and a sort of a momentum. And each time you go around, you are different, even though it doesn't look like it. It's sort of like the tree, you know, that grows in circles. It actually goes outward every time it comes back around. It is growing, and so much of
that's a great.
Isn't that interesting? You know, it's again moving away from the linear and into this circular process, and it means that you have to loop round and round again on the same sort of things that you thought you'd moved past, or it's why it's so hard to let go of a song, and it can feel like you're, and again, I've been sort of scared of the circular motion, but when you surrender to it and you just kind of, and it is a bit like unknowing because it's sort of, there's no clear direction to the circle. It doesn't have a beginning and an end point. It just kind of, you know, but I also think of it like a whirlpool, you know, it goes round and round and round, but there's something building in it. There's a stability in the circle as well. And you're right, the sphere it's a circle, it's hot, but it's holding all of this, and it's an expansion, and I don't know, it's really interesting to talk about the creative process because I think a lot of us don't really fully understand it. It's quite mysterious. It's quite, you know, divine almost. I think it's why we're also attracted to it. You know, we're like,
it's a weird skill to build because it's kind of like building a comfortability with not knowing. Yeah. But like not in a like give it away way, but it's still in a devotional way. Like I feel like it's still a devotion, but it's like kind of what we were saying earlier about like how much energy can I hold and not like burst. So you kind of have to know your limits of like what size of sphere am I currently at the capacity to hold, and then as that grows, that's exciting. Like one of my favorite things with like orchestration is like once I've kind of found like, oh, I can write for about 5 people and it feels like I know how to steer that ship, then I'm like, what about 6? What does it feel like to steer 6 people? And then that kind of, it's like you become a captain of a bigger ship or something like that. And it's like, oh, these are kind of different rules, or like these behave differently, like weight transfers differently with this amount of people, or like beautiful really imagery. I also like the image of a container, you know, like it's kind of like
the rules of the culture or the things that you set into place, the software, the door that you're using, the grid, or for me, you know, the project title. I put a container name, it's going to be called this, whatever. But then within that, you have to leave room for the container to break open, or for the plastic to melt and get, you know, allow it to get bigger. But it's important to have the container. You know, if you don't have the container at all, it is just abstraction. And that's the circle as well. The circle is containing in some way. Yeah. Just like, you know, we can say, oh, abandon all religion and anything to do with any, you know, institutions, just throw it all away. It's all useless. It's like, well, let's observe culture for thousands of years. Obviously, there's something to be said for like human beings applying some sort of like, and of course, we've gotten far too rigid with it, and that's what we always do. We start off with like a great idea. We put some, you know, walls in place to help contain it, and then it becomes about the building and not about the thing we're containing, right? Like that's the classic. Yeah, and it's not just churches and temples. It's corporate businesses. It's like anything that. But anyway, it's like there's still something to be. We can't throw out that need that humans still have to house something. Maybe and maybe that comes back to the body again, you know, like that we are in a vessel that has some limitations, but it's also what breeds the creativity, is because we have the limitations. We desire to push against it and push our body into doing athletic things, or our instrument into throaty, you know, spaces. I love to make my voice masculine, you know, because I am a female. So it's like, what is it? You know what I'm saying. I can tell you're all about this.
I love that stuff. Yeah, the thing about like painting with different colors. I know you've said that about singing before. I just watched a bunch of your interviews before you came, and I was like, okay, I totally understand that language. It's you're like working as a composer, but like live, and a lot of, I know you work in post and DAWs and all that stuff too, but it's really fun to do kind of like live painting. I love your Ableton set. Maybe you've done more than the one that I saw, but I think it was like maybe a 20-minute set with a couple other people. And you had
what would that have? Tell me more.
You had the Chaos Machine, I think that's what you call it. I think you had a Voice Live Touch and something else, but I was like, that girl is so in the zone that whole time. Like that was like, and it was like live painting, and I could kind of see almost like in slow-mo, like this thing come up, and then you like enter into it, and like it was so interesting. It was like,
thank you.
That's flow state, like and that, it sounds like that is like your true love, or like your
it is. When I think about, you know, coming back to basics of what really compels me about this work, is that it's like a practice for life. Like and I really mean this, that like that is not a state that I find myself living in day to day. I find that I have tendencies to be quite controlling and rigid and very perfectionistic, you know, just like all of us have our things. But it's something so beautiful when I step on stage and get into the space of complete confidence in what comes to me and my ability to transform it and use it. And it's like, you know, that curiosity, that empathy. That's not to say that my mind doesn't come in at times and try to, like, you know, attack me. Oh, you didn't nail that. I mean, I still have an inner critic that's going all the time. But something is...
Does she have a name?
She does, actually. She's like sort of fluid gender. She's called Bobby. Bobby is masculine and feminine at different times.
Bobby McGee?
Sure. Haven't given her a last name, but yeah, Bobby's like a child throwing a tantrum, and she wants what she wants, and she's pretty nasty, you know. So you have to work really hard to tell her she's safe, and part of that is being able to show her that like everything is workable, and you know, sound is the space where this kind of I find that for one reason or another, and I guess this is maybe the gifting of some of us, well, all of us have this, but those of us who do it through music, is I experience ease, you know, at executing an idea, like this ease of just like having a thought and then doing it. That's a beautiful feeling, to kind of be aligned. The idea forms, the body moves into the right posture to support that note. Right. You know, and then you also want to impose struggle, because I think that's the tension of music, is I like to do something often that will be provocative or like shake up the scene a little bit, because we're trying to give our experience to the audience. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of chaos that I live with. So it doesn't make sense for me to just do Serenity the whole time. Mm-hmm. But Serenity married with something violent and then back to Serenity, it's like I'm getting to put into the world an experience that feels very confusing and sometimes meaningless for me, you know, mm-hmm. like the flurry of like, why am I going through this? Why am I? Yeah. And then you put it into a sound space, and especially with a group of musicians that are also interested mm-hmm. in tension and in resolve. Mm-hmm. Oh, the beauty of resolve in music, like when mm-hmm. harmony, like it's transcendence. I have a whole podcast about transcendence.
I saw that you have a podcast.
Yeah, I think you'd actually really like it. And to be honest, that stuff's healing. Like when we experience transcendence as a group together. And the podcast is called Playing with Fire, because that doesn't come without a bit of danger.
That's right. Chaos magic. That's the word of the word of the day. Yeah. I think I've more recently like leaned into the chaos thing, because I think I kind of always saw it as like, oh, I'm seen as chaotic, or you know, it's like that's the thing I get thrown at me. And just recently, as of this last year, I was like, I'm gonna claim that. I'm like, yeah, okay. And then my friends started sending me, they're like, oh, have you heard of chaos magic? There are all these books on chaos magic, and it's like this whole world of like that's already been like researched and developed. And
someone very important in my life once said, because I had internalized that as manic, and he said, you're not manic, you're magic.
Ooh,
yeah. And I you know, it was like a real reframe to me. I was like, wow, what an interesting, it's just that I've judged that energy as something that's wrong and and sort of erratic, but I mean, energy's erratic too. I mean, you know, it's like we're all just mirroring things that have come back to us and that we see and that we experience. So another part of what makes performance when it's in flow state is the lack of like judgment. It's like letting you know what I mean? Like when you stop calling things right or wrong, and you just like let them tell you the next step. I love that in music. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Dive into the verse and then see how that feels, and then let that inform how the chorus is going to go vocally or with the gadgetry I'm using. It's like take one step and trust. It's a bit of a trustful, and again, it's all practice for life. I believe that if I can do some of this in music, I can maybe get a better hold on it.
Do you have other practices that you feel like nurture and develop that too in your life?
Meditation.
Yeah. Good for you.
Prayer. You know, spaces where I actively dialogue with the divine as I understand it, like outward, but it's paradoxically very inward too, because there's no God I believe in that is not indwelling. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's clearly coming from a deep place within whenever we commune with that thing, that source, that thing that that is nameless. That's why music's powerful, because we know that when we try to talk about the transcendent, or we know we're only pointing, that we can't get to it with words. Mm-hmm. So sound, and sometimes the marriage of poetry and sound, I think it gets close, pretty damn close.
I think that's like a special thing that songwriters get to have that I don't know that any other artist gets. It's kind of that combination of forces.
Yeah.
That is very special. It's like our like alphabet word technology and like the almost impossible beauty of music. It's like we get to fuse those, which is like, that's such a great crossroad. Like,
and it's funny because I know that I have that ability. I crave it in times where I'm in unknowing. Like I'm in a season right now where it's like the path feels quite, I'm doing a lot of reevaluating.
Holding containers?
Yeah, definitely. And not sure what's inside them,
right,
you know, or pregnancy. Another very good like feminine. I know I'm pregnant with something, but it's not clear to me.
That's so uncomfortable, that feeling.
Yeah, I bet. I haven't,
No, I have never been pregnant like that, but like in other ways, whenever I have like a a thing that I don't know what it is, I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm burst. But like, I don't know what it is yet. Yeah.
And it's really frustrating to feel like you can't articulate it as well when you know you have the ability and the gift to do so. And people have depended on you to do that before. And you're like, why can't I do it now? Like, well, that's also part of it. Like, I'm a big fan of Rilke, the poet, and he talks about this all the time, like the ripening of things, like waiting for the ripening and like being comfortable in the darkness. And that's actually
we don't have that language for artists, especially now. There's kind of like such a commodity driven, like you have to produce. And it's true that you have to create a lot, but it's like, I feel like in the sciences, it's very common that people are like, oh, it might take 20 years of practice before my action meets my philosophy. Yeah. And that's just, everyone understands that, like, yeah, that's like how science works. It might take you 20 years. But in the arts, it's like, okay, where's your thing? Like, you know, it's like, yo, that's not fair.
Totally.
Yeah.
Beautiful insight.
Do you want to play a song? Do you have 3 songs?
I do. Yeah. I mean, there were so many I could pick, but
I know.
I just
check my.
I know you said like ones that were impacting or meaningful in my life and career. So these are definitely
people choose all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, they're all pretty random.
Doesn't necessarily make sense on the surface.
Should we just listen to it first and then talk about it, or?
Yeah, I like that idea.
Okay, so I'm gonna make sure I've got the right one here. There's many versions. Here we go.
I don't know this person. Oh, that's such a good sound, though. I didn't know this human being, or if that's a human being. I don't know.
I can't not cry to that song.
That's so amazing.
Every time he hits that note, I can't, like, if I listen to it intentionally with other people like that, and I feel them experiencing it for the first time, I like it. It's just incredible. It just, for some reason, ever since I heard that, I knew it would be in my life forever. It was like exactly why I think music is so powerful, is that it can take us to these like breaking points inside us, where we go, where we experience a kind of surrender. And when you're hearing especially devotional music, music that comes out of prayer, like not, again, it's not about the proving. I mean, of course, we all know they're amazing players, but you sense this collective reaching. And that recording is far from perfect. In fact, there's a lot of moments where the bass player is like kind of just making it. You know what I mean? It's like, he like slides and just gets there. And there's a lot of moments where even the choir, if you're being really, they're like, you know, if I was in the studio working with them, guys, just oh, sharpen that, you know, because they're just like, I stray. But it's perfect because it's broken human beings that are messy saying we believe that we have this birthright of, you know, divinity and we're going to come together in our desperation. I mean, can you feel the yearning, the plight of the people in that? Gosh, I mean, chain gang music that comes out of, I saw you have a playlist on Sufi music and like ecstatic song from, you know, India, from all parts of the world. It's like that same thing, something about music that's made out of a place of like necessity. Like, you know, like those are my songs that I'm most proud of that I've written. You mentioned a song like Save Me, like I needed to write that song.
You can tell.
You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like, let me write a cool, like moody song. Right. It was like, no, I was in a place where there was nothing else to do but try to make some sense of it through a song. And there's a quality to that recording that just is so raw. And it's a really interesting play on space because you have this real sense of space. You have you can hear these overhead mics on the choir. It's like you're capturing the room. Then the pastor steps forward and he's so direct and in your face, like he stepped up the pulpit to do a sermon, and it comes out of nowhere. I heard your whole body shift. You know, and I love that sassiness to performance. I love to do that on stage too. I love to like step up and demand the room, you know? And I think at times I do think of a preacher quality, you know, that like and that's why it's so great to see an audience respect a performer and like listen to them like with that quality of like seriousness. He has that seriousness when he comes on the mic. And there's like a weird phaser on his voice. It's like distorting for most of the recording.
Sounds so good.
And it's just like, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. Because I have such a perfectionism complex, you know, that I think I listen to a piece of music like that and I go, oh, you know what? None of that. It's the spirit. It's the spirit of the music. It's the intention from which it was made. And it's the sacrifice in the performance. So sorry to get so emotional about it. I want to hear
Kimbra with choir.
Yeah.
I want to hear Kimbra Church.
Yeah. I did sing at Riverside Church with a Howard Gospel Choir, and it was a similar experience of like just collective power that comes from multiple voices, especially when lyrically it's not. I mean, look, regardless of what you actually sort of believe or subscribe to, everyone can kind of agree that when people move themselves towards something bigger than themselves, which is the act of music already, but then also when there's a lyrical quality that's sort of worshipping not us, but like something bigger, not even needing words, but just that something about certain spirituals, it just feels like humans find their greatest potential when they kind of forget themselves. That's what I'll say. There's a forgetting that happens, and my favorite moments of performance as well is when I actually sort of forget my ego and I become one with everything that's happening, a trance almost.
Oh, can we like live that way? How do we like?
Well, that's it. I know. Unfortunately, I know. And the same with, you know, taking substances that take us there. You go, what? Why can't I be here all the time?
Right.
Because it's the work of integration. It's taking those experiences and trying to like work them into life. And
I wonder if music is kind of like a taste of what could be. You know, it's like if you can tune enough. And I was thinking earlier, I can't remember exactly what you said, but I was thinking like, oh yeah, there's this element of like tuning, but tuning to what? And I think that's kind of what devotional music does. It's like, what are you tuning to? Like emotionally, spiritually, like you can tune to anything you want. And like a weird personal fact is that one side of my parents are psychics. And so I kind of like was raised like with psychics, and it's like a weird, a lot of people kind of think of like, oh, it's like woo-woo weirdness. And really when they talk about it, they're like, it's just a sensitivity. It's like, tapping into patterns that other people have access to, but they choose not to. It's really just like heightened sensitivity. And then I notice with them too, I'm like, oh, but you're just tuning to you're just tuning, but what are you tuning to? Because I don't always agree with what they bring up. And it's not that they're wrong. It's just like, oh, they've chosen a certain radio station and they're accurately sharing information from that radio station. But I'm like, but what if that's not the radio station you want? Like, what if you want a different vibration or like a different North Star or a different... So I'm like, ultimately that's kind of a useless skill unless you're taking the self-agency and the authority to be like, I have this sensitivity, I want to tune to something greater than myself, and I want it that, you know?
Got it. Yeah. And do you find that in the same way that like with spiritual sensitivity, psychic sensitivity, that there's still a limitation because we have to live in the body and live in the world? So sometimes when like we channel things,
that's really true.
Can they come through maybe the same as sacred texts? We say, oh, you know, it's all rubbish. It's like, well, it's probably not all rubbish because it's certainly, I think, possibility that there's an imbued divinity in these words, or because, you know, we can say things and they go, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
But they're humans still, so there's a clumsiness and clunkiness to our bodies. True. And I think that I wonder as well with like...
And to our desires sometimes too.
So to channelers, do they all sort of find obstacles in getting through completely? And is that why sometimes you're like, that clicked, but that wasn't quite it? Or, I mean, it's...
The thing that came to my head when you said that is, I remember they were like, oh, people are like asking us about money, but like they like talk to guides and they're like, they don't understand money, like the concept of money isn't, they don't get it. So like humans are kind of like, oh, how do I get more money? And they're just like, what
is money? Yeah, the closest like, thing they could probably compare.
You don't want like movement. Ultimate vibration of like high happiness. You want like this, like, what do you want?
What is it? It doesn't. Yeah, wow, that's right.
So there are like certain things that don't translate because they're just kind of like, yeah, we have this thing we do where we like trade heavy objects. Like, can you help us do that?
Yes, or like, are obsessed with the organism of our outward appearance. Right. And you're like, but what? That's like 1% of your whole...
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the surrender sometimes of music as well, as that, you know, I love, you know, how like singers, I'm sure it's the same for me, like when you really go for a note, you can look like pretty... ugly, you know, to the, because you're using it's gnarly and whatever, like, but
it's
again,
like us and trumpet players.
Yeah, but that's the surrender to the more important thing, which is getting the, I mean, no one cares about that at the end of the day. And again, I struggle with this because I do have a big part of me that considers myself in the pop world, and I think carefully about how I present myself, and I get obsessive about, you know, particular parts of my presentation, and oh God, it's exhausting to live in the world sometimes.
And like confining, and I know what you mean. It's so hard to let go of those. I think too, like there's a next layer as like a woman, because we're basically taught that that's the most important thing.
Value
is to be physically a certain way that we say is beautiful, and it changes all the time. So you have to like keep up with like, oh wait, what is it now? Wait, what is it now? I closed my eyes for 2 seconds. What is it now? But it's like so deeply embedded that it's really hard to like, you know, you're talking about the inner critic or the inner voice, to like kind of calm that part too and be like, no, we still have value if we don't like follow the trend of whatever the thing is, you know. That's like a full-time job.
It is. And I think we need moments of exhalation and connection and examples.
And if we don't have them, then to be them for the next generation of like, you know, I always think that it's the weirdest thing, but like I didn't know women could write songs until I discovered Joni Mitchell.
Wow.
And then I was like, it just never occurred to me that you could like just say how you feel like that. And like she's so raw in her songwriting that just like, wait, you can just say that? I mean, I feel that, but you can just say it? And like put it out there? That's a revelation. I think about how important it is to say the thing that you're like scared to say, and that you're like, I mean, Save Me was actually a song where I was like, I actually felt the pressure of always having to be, because there's been this movement, you know, of like, I mean,
a very necessary movement of empowering ourselves as women.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I don't know about you, but I feel the pressure to like actually always uphold the empowered state of confidence. Like, because I've got it, you know, I'm a feminist and I'm a, you know.
And it's like bravado. It's not even real confidence.
Right. But it's like part of the female experience as well is actually our deep vulnerability and sensitivity. And like, wow, I mean, you can't just be one thing all the time. And so I was like, what would be the most unsexy thing to say in a song? Like the most unappealing thing for like, you know, like what traditionally what a man would want a woman to say or whatever. And I was like, so that's when I wrote the lyric, I lack the courage to take care of myself. And then the sarcasm of, well, ain't that a turn on, babe? You know, because it's like, well, that's everything that you don't want to, you know, you want a woman to say like, I don't need a, you know, a man or whatever. I don't know. But the truth is like, I've spent a lot of my life looking to a man to validate me and give me my self-worth. My career's built on adoration and praise from other people. And like, sometimes that replaces my ability to do that for myself. It's not a very, you know, empowered thing to say, but it's true.
Yeah.
And actually by saying it, I do empower myself because I say it for someone else. And then they feel, oh, that's actually not like a terminally unique human experience. Someone else. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Watching people go before you.
Yeah. There's a lot that you just said there. Yeah. I want to hear one more song though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. One or two. We're kind of going long.
Oh,
yeah. True.
That's fine.
Do we have time for two more?
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one.
Wow. I was talking with, I'm in the world of dating apps right now, which is like a really hard.
I'm in the world of avoiding them at all costs. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, good for
but
you.
I've been there, yeah.
Good for you. And I was talking to a friend, because, you know, when you're on them, you like talk with other people who are on them and you kind of like kvetch.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, yeah, I'm meeting all these women who like, when they'll tell me, you know, I'll say like, what are you hoping to get, or what do you want to have a relationship or something, and they're like, oh, I'm all set, I have everything I love, I have my career, I have everything, this is just like the cherry on top or whatever. And he's like, that's an instant no for me, because he's like, that's a sign that you're not interested in doing all of the hard work it takes to really have a lasting relationship with someone, which is inherently challenging and requires devotion and requires like all these things we don't want to admit to ourselves, that like two extremely vulnerable people attempting to create some kind of trust that's like very hard and very intense to like keep and hold and nourish and like, and it's, yeah, it was like, oh, that's actually, I told him, I was like, yeah, women are kind of taught to say those things on dates, because we're taught that if we don't say, oh, I have everything I need and you're the cherry on top, that we're like needy and like, you know. And I was like, it's nice to hear your perspective, because yeah, we're just kind of trained to like, you should have everything you need, and then he just like is your arm candy. And it's like, ugh, gross. Like, who wants that? Like, when you really think about it too, you're like, I don't want that.
No,
like,
totally. Vulnerability is where it's at.
Yeah.
You know, because it's fertile for growth. It's the seed that's kind of like bursting up, and it's kind of, but it's that's the growth.
Right.
When something gets rigid, when like a wound gets scabbed over, it just forms a scar, and now there's no growth. Actually, that's what makes it a scar. It's not, you know, the vulnerability of a open wound is, you know. I mean, of course, we don't want to turn off just being like but yeah, there's got to be a balance, because that's a lot to hold. It becomes another thing for women to hold on top of all things that we have to already.
Right.
You know what I mean? Now we have to be like larger than life, and you know, not need anything, not need anyone. I don't know.
Pass.
Okay. So this is a song by Prince, which is, it's just the one.
I love that your first Grammy was given to you by Prince. I think that's so beautiful.
Yeah, that's kind of full circle, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and it's cool that just to see, I guess I don't totally know before that moment how you developed your musical life, but to kind of see how you've developed it since then is like, it makes sense that would be a mentor for you, you know, like you can see the inhabiting like the philosophy and the qualities of like curiosity and getting your hands in there. And I know one of the things he said was like, if you want longevity in the music industry, learn everything you possibly can. And I feel like you do that. You like take that for real. So
Thank
I feel like
you.
that's his legacy. I feel like that he passes to artists. He's like, get in there, learn it all, do it all, take the reins. Like,
yeah, so. Wow. I feel you on that. That's for sure. Here we go.
That beat. Every time.
So many things in that recording.
So many things.
And so many decisions that I'm like, whoa, that's so weird. Like how loud Prince's vocals are mixed toward the end, and how like those synths come in and then they just suddenly go out. And just like all of these, his productions are always so like, they have this like obnoxious quality to them where they break a lot of rules and they don't like, there's not a polished, like neat, like mix. It's just always got this kind of like, otherworldly feeling and a sense of like provocation in it that I just it's just what stands out so much. Also began my love of cabasas, which is like my favorite instrument ever.
Really? I don't know much about cabasas. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, of course, the heartbeat of Timbaland. It's the heartbeat of so much R&B, but man, anytime I'm like strapped with a beat and I'm working on something, I'm like,
that's your cowbell?
Cabasa? Yeah.
That's so funny.
It's just like, it cuts. It's like a hi-hat, but it's just that little shaker quality. It's like, it's the art of syncopation comes from the cabasa, I think. It's like, anyway, but I just love it in that song.
I hear too, like, kind of the common theme of call and response, which I also hear in like Exotech and in all in the like Ableton live sets that you did, and it's so ancient. Like the call and response format is just it, and the way that it builds energy is kind of like you were talking about, you know, like the vine that grows and kind of like builds this. I feel like call and response, and it doesn't, you know, because we're always taught like first chorus, bridge chorus or something. You're like, okay, yeah, kind of. But then there's like this other, there's this other thing happening, and like, you know, that came out of gospel music. It's like pastor says this, choir says that back.
Yeah, totally.
And that it's like so ancient and like our
that's it
blood or something, that call and response thing. And Prince does that too. And like it's
maybe
cool.
That's something, a running theme like of songs that inspire me have that quality to them. I think.
Like the slow and steady build, I think that comes from that too, which is like you were talking about in the first song, like that yearning that comes out of his voice at the end.
Yes.
You're like, it's because of the way that like the thing unraveled and then finally it was like that call.
And the patience of his vocal phrasing,
oh gosh, so much patience in that whole thing.
Baby. That's all I'm gonna say.
I know,
you know, like just the confidence to open with that. What's it gonna be? It's just like these questions that just land and they're just not overdone. It's just
the beat is open too.
It's open wide, true, and everything that comes in is like got a purpose. That counterpart that's like doing that dissonance. It's it's that feeling of like the ominous, beautiful one coming to break your heart. It's just my love of a great ballad too. You know, I'm a sucker for like a really well set up ballad with like movements in the pre-chorus that go somewhere, you know, unexpected, and then landing on a chorus. Like I'm just a sucker for that stuff. And I heard this record, or I was listening to it a lot way later than I was listening to this from 18 years old or something was the first time I really got into Purple Rain. My first Prince record was Musicology.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because I was around when that I was listening to music as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old when that record was coming out. But yeah, this one took me somewhere, and I always come back to it when I want to feel just like, it's just so sexy. He
does sexy, like no one can do sexy like Prince can do sexy. It's like he can just, I don't know how he does that. Talk about channeling or like being able to hold an energy.
It's the swagger, it's the confidence, but it's a vulnerability too.
I think that's right.
It's the breaking point in Prince that he channels that I've always been drawn to, is like the push into like a place that's a little bit like dangerous.
I think that's what that is. Yeah, that's the special sauce. What was I going to say about maybe it's gone now. I was just thinking about him and his like qualities or like what he's able to do. I lost it, but
that's okay.
Yeah, he's one of I had like the beautiful opportunity to study with one of his mixing engineers for like a summer in LA. And just kind of, it's no surprise, when you talk to people who've worked with an artist of like, that has a certain like you were saying, like there's so many decisions in there that are like, oh, that's an interesting.
Yeah.
And he had like the level of control that he had was like, drove a lot of people completely insane.
Oh my gosh.
Like a lot of people really didn't want to work with that.
Yes.
And that's kind of the weird, uncomfortable part too, where it's like, if you have a clear vision, and like in the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about like, it doesn't quite work when it's like, okay, well, I'm going to do this part and then you just do that part. It's like, no, it's a whole being.
Yes.
And like, so I'm going to have to push back, or I'm going to have to like carve out.
Yeah.
This.
Yeah. It's why I didn't really want to speak much to Prince. I mean, obviously there was opportunities. He had his shades on and his cane, and I mean, he took his glasses off when he handed us the Grammy. So we got that direct eye contact. Yeah. And I have had contact with Prince. He asked me to play Paisley Park shortly before he passed away. So I would have been on my way to that. He also did listen to my second album and told Janelle Monáe, who's a friend of mine, that his favorite song on the record was Carolina. And it was a song that's kind of almost Beach Boys-y inspired, Fleetwood Mac-y. It's very bandy. And I just thought that was so fascinating and incredible that he took the time to listen to the whole thing.
And like deeply listen.
And make sure that the message got to me. Of what his favorite song was. Anyway, bring that up all to say that like, I'm not in a rush to really go beyond much more than that. Like just, eye contact and maybe like a mutual respect with great artists like that. Because I mean, to make the kind of music they make, they're probably not the easiest people to communicate with anyway. They're probably quite, you know what I mean? Like if you get in the right environment, maybe you could have a heart to heart like this. But doesn't mean these people aren't deeply flawed in the ways that they run their own lives and probably have relationships and everything. And we've all heard that thing of like, never meet your heroes because they might disappoint you. But, we hear a lot about Prince being a very, a visionary, but also a lot of people were, cast out in the wave of his vision. And that's the thing is like,
a strong stance.
I
think that I find that really hard. That's something I'm working through in general is like, oh, people are not going to like me. I have to accept that if I want to stand for something, that means that there's going to create some kind of a chasm where people are going to decide that because I've taken a stance that they're now against that. And I just like, it's so hard to be okay with that. So I feel like on the surface, I'm like, I'm okay with it. People are not gonna like me, but like I'm like, ooh, I don't like that. That's hard.
I know. Yep, that's another, slightly gendered thing of people pleasing, and but oh man, I struggle with that too because I really do just want to be liked, by everyone.
And it ends up feeling like life or death weirdly. It's like, if people don't like me, I will die, and I'm like, oh, I'm sure on some level that's probably true. Like in my caveman brain, it's like, oh, if your community rejects you, you can't survive in the wild. But you're like, wait. But that time is like, I actually can't. Like, it's going to be okay.
And that's why I think there's a lot of like forgiveness for when it's in service of the music. Like, it's like, you can imagine Prince being like, it's not personal. It's just that it has to be right. Because I'm so devoted to, it's like that thing of like believing it's sacred. It's God's work. You're building a temple. You're building a church. So I need to get it needs to be the way that I'm downloading it. So that might mean that I have to say, now you need to go because you're not serving the image I have. Tricky stuff because, we want to think that we can get there with everyone, being happy and collaborating perfectly. And art requires tension and it requires frustration and leadership. Yeah.
And maybe new styles of leadership now, which I think is really exciting and cool. I don't think we know quite what that looks like, but I see it happening in education too, where it's like, we've got like the very top universities and then the community colleges that are, I think, going to be fine, but the 80% in between are probably going to go away because they're charging this huge tuition for not, it's like, well, what are we doing this education for, to get jobs? There are no jobs in this field, unless you're coding or something. So it's like kind of this big, like the waves are coming and kind of like and I feel like it's a similar thing in like leadership and in artistic communities where it's like, especially like right after COVID, all these artists are like, why the hustle? Like we're all getting back on tour buses, but none of us are actually making the bottom line. Like I go on this giant tour, leave my family, go through all this stress, and I have not come back with any, if anything, I'm in the red.
Yep.
It's like,
oh, you are speaking to me right now. Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, yeah, I want to be devoted, but like for a purpose, or like for, you know, there has to be, we kind of have to like regroup here.
It has to be life-giving, like for both parties. If it's just, and like it can't be just a constant depletion and burnout. And and it takes, I mean,
like we're all in debt. That's what it feels like. You know, it's the same thing with like the education system. Everyone's like, I'm like drowning under debt and there are no jobs. What's the point again? It's like, great question. That's a great question.
No, and it's really easy to get hopeless at that point. But my only thing that's giving me solace right now is like a working backward to like, why in the first place am I even attracted to this? What? Because it gets so much about the other things.
Yeah.
And for someone like me, all the business is built on the other things. Like they care about the other things, not the thing deeply that I care about. As much as you want to believe that they all just want you to do the spiritual thing that you want to do. It's like they have, you know, want to, and you kind of need them to, because otherwise you don't have the money to sustain the things you. But for me, like, there's no music, no albums, no anything unless I'm in love with it and inspired to do it. So, and there's no, you know, there's no schools or no universities if no one has any desire to learn. So you have to go back almost to like the most primal reasons why people gravitate to these places to begin with. The calling, the deep, the connection, the first love. That's, if you can work from that place and be like, okay, what do I need then to ensure that I can stay as much as I can connected to that? What's a non-negotiable, you know?
Yeah, that's good.
That I have to have. I'm talking out loud as I'm in the process of this, but these are like the little things that are coming up for me around like how to just stay in flow and how to make it worth continuing to do.
It made me think of Marie Kondo. Do you know this lady?
Of course, yes. Like I just finished a huge spring clean in my apartment based off the techniques. So
it's like take everything out of the closet and it looks like a huge mess, and you're like, only put back what sparks joy. And you're like, oh, I have 5 things in my closet. That's good to know. 5 things.
I know. That's how I felt on my way up here. I was like,
that's
cool.
a good feeling, though.
Don't have a long sleeve. And it's kind of cold outside. But we can work if we do this and put this with this.
Oh, man, time to Marie Kondo the music industry.
A little bit.
Yeah. I love it. Well.
Yeah. Everything's become very chaotic, so where's the magic? Let's get the magic back. Oh, we'll join. This is kind of negative, and I don't totally 100% agree, but it is by Joni Mitchell, so I do have to say.
Yes. She said the muse has left the music industry, and now it's just the ick business.
Wow.
I mean, she's quite harsh. I do love her.
Well, she's not wrong.
She's not wrong.
And I have certainly felt that myself. Yes. One of my favorite things that Joni Mitchell has said, that I saw in an interview that I found on YouTube once, was people are afraid of what they don't understand. And it's been a very big like mantra for what I've like tried to do in my music and what I've tried to sit with and unpack. And, you know, it's like the fear is when we don't take the time to be curious about something and sit inside it, and we stay far away from it and refuse to try and understand it. And maybe it's also like that with artists. Sometimes we can be very avoidant of the music business because it's like, my brain doesn't do that. I'm like, ugh, I don't do math and stuff. Give me a synthesizer, like, you know, spreadsheets. It's so me, you know. I'm trying to lean in towards this stuff and be like, you know, I'm smart. I can understand it. I can get in, and then I'll be less afraid of it. And in the same sense, you know, how can I lean into emotions and spaces and places in music that are a little scary, so that I can occupy that place. get familiar with it, right? Get familiar with the inner critic. Give her a name. Give it.
Right.
You know,
have a conversation.
Have a conversation. Yeah. Understand it. What do you want? What are you scared of? What are you? You're less afraid of it. Yeah. I thought that was so wise when she said that. Yeah.
Number 3.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna go more modern.
That's such a good line.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
Wow.
So that song to me just represents just like ultimate playful creativity. It's, you said it, wherever the wind takes us. It feels like these sections begin and you're like tumbling down the stairs into like, you just don't know where you're going. And they have that chaotic, magical quality, all of the sections that come in. And then the complete fulfillment of like them all coming back together on top of each other and working and syncopation. And it's like, you know, it's groovy. It's like, okay, cool. They set up a bass line, but then it like transposes
immediately
up, and then down
right
again. Yeah, so it's like the little surprises and then the kind of princey, oh, honey, you know, like the very kind of poppy kind of melodies. And it's just like one of those through line kind of arrangements where it doesn't have the clear chorus and stuff. It's just kind of like developing sections that all kind of, one door opens and then another door opens.
That's a big theme for you.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And I think I do like arrangements like that kind of just and unfold into the next section. And just something about that synthesizer that comes in. Every time it happens, I do the same thing. I do this with my body. And I'm like, like I get so hyped to show someone that bit. And I'm like, something about that spirit, that thing that just went like that. I'm like, that's when we go back to basics, like let's go back, deconstruct what I want to give to the world, or like what I want to hold on to, is like that fan that's like, the bit's coming, and I don't know why I like it so much, except that it's just like, so it's kind of goofy, it's so like unexpected, and just kind of it breaks rules while also like serving the purpose completely, like to be a synth solo, but also it's just like so out there. And
absurdity is fun.
Yeah.
I think we need it.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know why, but like when I see the work that I love the most, or like the movements of art that I love the most, there's always some like absurdity in there. Like, oh, that's like a key quality of
Yep.
I wonder what that is. Maybe about like kind of breaking open, like we were talking about, like something that kind of pushes a little bit.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting. Absurdity is kind of like it's like something warped, isn't it? It's something being like a little kink in the way you think. It's just like a little like a little bend and
like kids play with that all the time. Like I was thinking about my niece when you were talking, because she'll come up with games all the time. She's 2, or she just like creates bizarre worlds, Like the other day, she was just like laid down on the floor with all of her stuffed animals around. She was like, resting. And they were like all like around her face. And my brother was like, should I be concerned? She was like, yes. And then she laughed. She was like, just kidding. And it was like so weird. I was like, you're such a strange, I love it. But
That's
it's like,
awesome.
You're 2 and you're already playing with this weird, absurd, like mime world.
Yes.
Of like, now we're over here.
Yes.
Now I'm this character.
Because there's no,
and it's for no purpose other than just like tee-hee.
Yeah, totally. You don't have what one of my favorite authors calls paralyzing intervention of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Just like the thing that paralyzes us into being like, oh, I'm being watched and witnessed, and I guess that makes me clumsy, so I'm not going to do that.
Which now more than ever. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm finding it very hard to live in the world as it is right now.
It's too self-aware in a weird way.
Yeah, I know. And we all feel like we have to kind of just keep doing it that way because that's the way it is now. But
it's boring.
Like, it's really boring. It's really boring. Actually, that's one thing about my industry that I find really boring, is like that it's so much about me. Like I say this often, I'm like, it's really like focusing on myself all the time is really, it's so much fun to like get it, like fall in love with someone else. And that's why I fall in love so easily and quickly, because it's like an escape from, it's like so fun to just like go into an session with someone else, but it's also to be enveloped in the trees is like so interesting.
That's true.
So you're not just thinking about yourself anyway.
And in kind of like the same way, it's like when you have to do your spiel, your like 30-second spiel over and over again. It's like people are like, tell me about yourself. You're like, ugh, okay, I did the thing and then I did that. Moving on.
Yeah. And you're like, it's really not that interesting.
Right. Or like, I've said it so many, it doesn't really give you, like, you're not going to get the information you're mining for there. If you're wanting to get to know me, that's not going to help you get to know me. Like,
yes, it's not fresh.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That would be an interesting exercise. That would be like, if every time you met someone you didn't explain anything that has happened before now or something like that. It's like you only lived forward.
Well, that's why it's really satisfying to talk about like where I'm at right now with you. That it's like I'm in a kind of a stage of a little bit of disillusionment and deconstruction, So, but of course in any other interview you wouldn't kind of like be completely honest about like, because it's always so much like a reflection of your past, or like what's your next project. Like those are sort of the two places that interviews seem to kind of rather than like, what are you inspired by right now and what's making you really sad right now. We're just
already a lot to talk about. It's like that could already fill a lot of time.
Yeah,
that's so true.
Wow. So music is presence. I think that's the other thing. It's presence. That's what we crave.
That's so true. Yeah, and that requires, I always think about this too, because I think when I create performances, sometimes I get obsessed with like, oh, I want other people to experience this thing, or I want them to have, and I think in some way of curating that makes sense, but there's another side where I've had to acknowledge like people earn their experience, and like kind of like what you're saying about like, oh, Prince listened deeply to this record and then he found his, it's like, oh, that's, you can't do that work for somebody else. Like someone has to decide like, I'm going to show up in these layers in these ways to grasp this, and this is how much I can intake of what you've given. So it's like it's such a weird, like, you have to do the work to create the full encompassing thing. That doesn't mean that people are going to walk away with the full thing. It's like they earn their levels of like respect for sound, or I don't know, overwhelmment of sound, or like I don't know. I sometimes I've been in spaces where like someone is making some sound, like my whole body shivers, but the person next to me is just like, and I'm like, do you not like, do you not uncontrollably like flinch when you,
that's a fascinating one. How we, receive the experience of music differently. Probably based on, where we're at in our lives in that moment. And
like how open, maybe it's the vulnerability thing too, where it's like, that's scary to open your nerve endings to like what may come, what may envelop you. And it's like, if you're like, no, I can't receive any more information, then it's like, oh, well then it'll bypass you and like filter into
the next person.
And whenever you're ready, you know.
It's a big part of my music practice is to listen to stuff that is as different as possible to what I make, you know. And I had a big love of metal when I was young, and still really
that's surprising to me. That's really cool.
Like heavy riffs and like time signatures that are really odd, and change ups between like polyrhythmic stuff like Meshuggah. You know, and I feel my resistance to how sort of abrasive it is. But I know that reflects a part of my experience of living in the world too. So it's like I try to do the work of opening to that and finding what I like in it. Like that actually, when you break it down, a lot of it's Latin. Like
that's true.
Like, so I try to let my brain get like permeated with these rhythms and sounds that are maybe like not immediately pleasurable. But again, it's that people are afraid of what they don't understand thing. It's like, how can you be curious? And I'm better at it with music than I am necessarily with like people. And, you know, that's the thing is music, I'm my better self because I have this curiosity and like awe and wonder, and, you know, it's why I want to live there.
Consistent too. I feel like people are very inconsistent. So it's like really hard to put any kind of sense of stability in it. But when you have a practice that you're like, oh, this generally happens this way, and I know if I do this, I can generally expect. But like people, you really can't do. They're like, they're following their own North Star.
True. People are more complicated than an instrument or something. That's a really good point. Cut myself a break there.
Well, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I haven't heard. I'd heard the middle song of my dear Prince, but I definitely didn't know who the
That's kind of why I picked them, because I was kind of like, maybe these are different, and like
I'm
I had
so amazed
many
that like a life in music, and every time I hear songs I don't know. Everybody who comes here, I'm like, didn't know that one, didn't know that one, didn't even know that style of music existed. Like, it's so cool for me.
Cool. Well, I'm so happy that was illuminating in some ways for you. You have just been fantastic to talk to.
Oh, yay.
Got so many interesting ideas from this conversation.
That's so good.
I feel like we're been thinking along a lot of the same lines.
I think it's cool to kind of see this like precipice of maybe a revolution in the music industry. And I don't think it has to be like a huge explosion or anything, but I think it's really cool when you see kind of like key people that have a lot of skills and have a vision and are like, I'm not going that way. It's like, yes. Because it's like, there's a better way to say this, but I always end up kind of thinking like, if I'm the goose who lays the golden eggs, like if I'm doing the work, then why am I pissed that someone else, it's like, I'm doing the thing. Like, I should just take the agency to decide how I want that thing to move in the world and stop, like you're saying, kind of avoiding spreadsheets. It's like that same kind of like It's like, I make this thing and I'm just mad. And I'm like,
right.
Hope, you made that. Go do what you like. Just take the...
I know, the frustration of that.
Yeah.
But I will say, I think that, again, it's the pregnancy thing of like, and the 20-year practice of the scientist. It's like, if there's enough devotion to see the future you want to see, to have faith that it will emerge. I mean, it's going to take work. It's going to take conversations with like minds and everything, and probably some courageous moves. Like me saying, actually, maybe I don't want to do that makes the most lucrative sense, and I want to do this, and that might seem crazy, but it's going to ultimately be, it's going to take making some big moves, but they don't have to come all at once overnight, I think.
Right, yeah, that's true.
You need to give time for the vision to like be, if when they say like, if you keep digging up to see if the plant is growing, and you're like, is it come out yet? It's like, doesn't have time to, so you gotta trust that it will, the strategic side of it will emerge, because that's the frustration, right? Is that you have the vision, but you're like, well, what's the strategy to get there?
Right.
And enough interesting conversations and enough trust in the, what did you say at the start? Cognitive distribution. Maybe that's something that will have to be like,
but it's true.
engaged.
It's like musicians are, and I think artists are like kind of the shamans of our culture. They're the guides. So it's like remembering that's like, okay, I have to kind of like sense my, and then even if no one believes me, I have to kind of like tune into that thing and like go there, because ultimately my like archetype in this structure, like my little wheel inside the watch has this function, and that function is tricky because it's like you have to be the first one. And I think leaders in other areas are similar, where it's like the leader's the one who goes first. It's not like the one who has the most followers or like whatever. It's like the one who makes the step first before anyone else sees the logic in that stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Oh, Lordy, I see your vision, and I'm
I
here
see your
for
vision.
it. No, you are a very
Together.
powerful person, because
thank you.
You're dreaming, and it sounds like you're not afraid
And
to
scheming.
take some dreaming and scheming. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of 3 Songs. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider liking and subscribing to this channel, and remember to turn the notification bell on so you can be updated when new episodes are published. This is an interactive project aimed at building a meaningful musical community online, so I would love to hear your thoughts and musings, or even a song recommendation in the comments below. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on all platforms at Hope Littwin or at hopelittwin.com. And my music is available on Spotify, iTunes, and Bandcamp under my name, Hope Littwin. Peace out.